Jacob, a humble farmer, had never imagined stepping inside a mansion, let alone caring for one. But when a millionaire named Victor Van Hoff offered him a position as a caretaker for his vast estate and his 2 children, Jacob could hardly refuse. The pay was beyond anything he'd seen, and the opportunity seemed like a gift. Yet, hidden behind the walls of wealth and grandeur, something darker loomed. One evening, after Victor returned home earlier than expected, he discovered something that shook his very soul and made him question everything he had ever believed. Victor Van Hoff, a self-made millionaire, was the embodiment of success. Tall, handsome, and commanding, he built his empire from the ground up, with his sprawling mansion standing as a symbol of his wealth. Despite his financial triumphs, however, he struggled to balance his personal life. His wife had passed away years ago, leaving him with 2 children, Evelyn, 10, and Michael, 6. Both children were fragile, withdrawn, and missing the warmth of a loving home since their mother's death. Victor, buried under the weight of his business responsibilities, could never provide the nurturing they needed. Every day he was consumed by meetings, deals, and phone calls, leaving little time to be with his children. He needed someone trustworthy, gentle, and kind to look after them, a figure who could offer them what he couldn't. And so, after a brief search, he hired Jacob, a local farmer known for his simplicity, honesty, and warm heart. Jacob, in his early 40s, had lived a modest life working his small farm. His hands were rough from years of tilling the soil, but his heart was tender. He had no children of his own, but he'd always had a soft spot for kids. The thought of stepping into a life of luxury was daunting, but he accepted the job without hesitation, driven by the thought of making a better life for himself. When Jacob first arrived at the mansion, he felt out of place amidst the marble floors, grand staircases, and crystal chandeliers. The children, Evelyn and Michael, were shy and quiet, watching him from behind closed doors. They were not used to new people, having grown up with only their stern father and a rotating staff of nannies who had all left for one reason or another. The walls of the mansion were cold, despite the luxury, and the air was heavy with silence. Jacob, though humble and unfamiliar with such extravagance, slowly found his place. His genuine care and compassion for the children began to break down their walls. He didn't treat them like fragile, wealthy heirs, he treated them like they were his own. He taught them simple things: how to plant a small garden in the backyard, how to care for animals, how to find joy in the smallest moments. Slowly but surely, the mansion started to feel alive again. Evelyn, the older of the 2, started to come out of her shell. She would follow Jacob around, asking questions about the farm, the animals, and the world beyond the gates of their estate. Michael, the younger one, who had always been prone to fits of sadness and anger, began to laugh again, something the household hadn't heard in years. Victor, though rarely home, noticed the changes in his children during his brief visits. Evelyn seemed more confident, and Michael's tantrums were less frequent. He was grateful to Jacob but remained distant. His heart was still chained to the grief of losing his wife, and he couldn't bear to spend more time in the home that reminded him of his failure as a father. One day, Victor, out of gratitude, invited Jacob into his private office for a drink. He shared stories of his late wife, their dreams for the children, and the guilt that gnawed at him for being absent in their lives. Jacob, sensing the pain in Victor's words, spoke humbly, "Children don't need grand gestures or riches, Victor. They need love, and they need time." It's not too late for you to give them that. Victor, though appreciative of the sentiment, brushed it off. Time is something I don't have, Jacob. That's why I hired you. Months passed, and Jacob had become more than just a caretaker. He had become a part of the children's lives, a father figure in ways Victor could not be. But as things settled into a comfortable routine, Jacob began to notice something unsettling. There was an air of secrecy in the mansion, a tension that neither the children nor the staff spoke of openly. At night, when the halls were quiet, he would hear strange sounds, whispers, footsteps, and sometimes, faint sobs. One evening, as he was putting Michael to bed, the little boy asked him in a trembling voice, "Jacob, do you think Mommy is angry with us?" Taken aback, Jacob knelt beside Michael's bed. "Why would you say that, lad?" "Because I hear her crying at night. Evelyn hears it too." Jacob's heart sank. He didn't believe in ghosts or the supernatural, but the sorrow in the children's eyes was real. Something was haunting them, and it wasn't a spirit, it was the grief and loneliness that had been left unchecked for too long. As the days went by, Jacob decided to investigate. He spent his nights roaming the mansion, hoping to uncover the source of the strange noises. The staff was tight-lipped, and even Evelyn seemed reluctant to speak about it. The once warm atmosphere began to chill, and Jacob felt a growing unease. Something was wrong in this house, something deeper than just grief. One stormy evening, Jacob noticed a light coming from the attic, a part of the mansion he had never ventured into. His curiosity piqued, he climbed the stairs quietly. As he reached the attic door, he heard faint sobs. His heart pounded in his chest as he slowly opened the door. To his shock, he found Evelyn sitting on the floor, clutching an old photograph of her mother. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "I miss her so much, Jacob. I don't want Daddy to forget her." Jacob knelt beside her, his heart breaking for the young girl. "Evelyn, your mother will always be with you, in your heart. No one can take that away." Evelyn nodded but didn't say a word. She simply handed Jacob the photograph, a picture of Victor, his wife, and a young Evelyn. But as Jacob looked closer, he noticed something strange. The date on the back of the photograph didn't match up with what Victor had told him about his wife's death. According to the date, the photo had been taken a year after Victor claimed his wife had passed. Confused and shaken, Jacob couldn't let go of the inconsistency. Why would Victor lie about something so important? Was there more to his wife's death than he had let on? The question gnawed at him, and he decided to confront Victor. One evening, when Victor returned from a business trip, Jacob asked to speak with him in private. Hesitant, but curious, Victor agreed. "Victor," Jacob began, carefully choosing his words, "I found this photograph in the attic. The date, it doesn't match the story you told me about your wife." Victor's face paled. His eyes darted to the photograph, and for the first time, Jacob saw fear in the millionaire's eyes. "There are things you don't understand, Jacob," Victor said, his voice trembling. "Things I've tried to forget." Jacob pressed him gently. "You can trust me, Victor. But the truth needs to come out." Victor collapsed into a chair, burying his face in his hands. After a long silence, he finally spoke. "My wife didn't die in an accident, Jacob. She took her own life." The confession hung in the air like a weight too heavy to bear. Jacob's heart sank, but Victor wasn't finished. "I found her that day, in the very room where the children sleep." Evelyn saw it. Michael was too young to remember. "I told them it was an accident, but I could never face the truth. I've been living a lie ever since, trying to bury the pain with work, with wealth. But it's eating me alive, Jacob. It's tearing my family apart." Jacob was at a loss for words. He had never imagined the burden Victor was carrying. The mansion, the wealth, the power, it had all been a facade to hide the deep pain that consumed him. Victor, broken and vulnerable for the first time in years, turned to Jacob. "I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to be the father they need." Jacob, with tears in his own eyes, placed a hand on Victor's shoulder. "You don't have to do it alone, Victor. But you need to face the truth, for your children's sake. They deserve to know what really happened. They deserve your love." In the days that followed, Victor made a difficult decision. He sat down with Evelyn and Michael and told them the truth about their mother. It was a painful conversation, but one that finally allowed the family to begin healing. The children cried, but they no longer felt the weight of secrecy hanging over them. They began to talk openly about their mother, about their memories of her, and about the pain they had all been holding onto for so long. Victor, for the first time, began spending more time at home. He wasn't perfect, and the road to healing was long, but he was present. He was there for his children, and they began to rebuild their relationship. Jacob, having fulfilled his role, quietly stepped back. He returned to his farm, but he remained a close friend to the family. The mansion, once cold and filled with sorrow, became a place of warmth and love once more. And though Victor would never forget the tragedy that had shattered his family, he found solace in the fact that he was no longer running from the truth. He had faced his demons, and in doing so, had found a way to move forward. The tale of Victor Van Hoff and Jacob, the humble farmer, is one of tragedy and redemption. It is a reminder that wealth and power cannot shield us from pain, and that the truth, no matter how painful, is the only path to healing. In the end, it wasn't Jacob's job to care for the mansion or even the children. It was his job to help Victor find the courage to care for them himself. The end.